Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
The question, how to handle an attorney general who you believe committed a crime.
It just isn't true.
Should he go to jail for it?
There's a process involved here, and as I said, I'll say it again, and how many other questions you may have, the committee will act upon how we will proceed.
That was Pelosi today saying Barr lied to Congress, but avoiding the question about actual jail time. And then there's the provocative take from my next guest, former Clinton Labor Secretary Robert Reich, who wrote before Barr's testimony that one remedy, if Barr does not cooperate with Democrats in Congress, could indeed be arresting him and putting him in jail. Robert Reich is joining me now, and thank you so much for being here, Robert. Very much appreciate it. You wrote that before Barr testified, obviously, yesterday. Has your view changed at all?
No, Jasmine. He refuses to testify before the House. Now, there is some negotiation going on. Maybe he will testify before the House. But there is an old precedent in this country under the Constitution of the United States, affirmed by the Supreme Court, that says that the House and the Senate, each chamber, has an inherent power to compel a witness to testify if that witness just refuses. And that includes arrest, and even includes jail. And we forget that because it's been such a long time. It's been 34 wow. since that happened. But it's there, and the Supreme Court has affirmed that authority. And the reason I put that out there is because, and that was even before Nancy Pelosi said what she said today, because we really have to think of this in terms of a constitutional crisis. If the president and the administration are stonewalling and they say there will be absolutely no information, no testimony, no report, no Mueller report that goes to the House, then the House is powerless unless the House takes some action.
It seems, though, I have to say, especially with the people that I've been speaking to, incredibly unrealistic to imagine the Attorney General being put in handcuffs and behind bars. Here is what you wrote. The House can order its own sergeant at arms to arrest the offender, subject him to a trial before the full House, and if judged to be in contempt, jail that person until he actually appears. Do you think this is a realistic scenario or just a threat?
This is a realistic threat. But let me say why this is an important threat.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the Trump administration can just run out the clock. In other words, Congress could decide, the House could decide to hold a witness in contempt, which is criminal, and then it would just languish through the courts. And because the Justice Department really runs the show, it could take another year and a half, and then the clock runs out. The way to expedite this issue up to the Supreme Court and not let the Trump administration Constitution, run the clock, is to actually act on the constitutional authority that the House has. And that constitutional authority, as I said, enshrined in a Supreme Court case, I think it was called Journey versus McCracken, 1935. You go look back at it. It's very clear that the House could actually do that. But in so threatening, it would, and even if you had the Sergeant at Arms of the House go over to the Justice Department, I mean, I doubt that there would actually be such a clash, but you would have to get it would force the Trump administration to get an injunction in court, and that would be expedited, I expect, up to the Supreme Court.
You actually served in the Clinton administration. I want to take a listen to Lindsey Graham back in actually 1998, talking about presidents who defy subpoenas.
It's your job to tell us what we need. It is your job to comply with the things we need to provide oversight over you. The day Richard Nixon failed to answer that subpoena is the day that he was subject to impeachment because he took the power from Congress.
I'm going to bet Lindsey Graham has changed his tune today, which I think we full well know he has. But could the same actions apply now?
Of course, even Sam Ervin. Do you remember Senator Sam Ervin, the Watergate chairman of the Watergate Committee? He threatened, and very, very explicitly, anybody from the administration, including the president, that did not show up for a subpoena, they would be arrested. He was threatening arrest at that time, back in the early 70s, under Watergate. So this is not completely out of the question. And although Republicans like Lindsey Graham, will talk about it when their person is not actually, their administration is not under the gun, this is something that is necessary to threaten, because otherwise, and this is the important point, otherwise there is no power in Congress, in the House or the Senate, each chamber separately, to oversee what the administration is doing. The Constitution makes these branches of government co-equal branches, and it's not co-equal if the president can just say, well, forget it. I'm going to order everybody to basically reject any subpoena, any request for information, and it doesn't matter if you hold anybody in contempt.
It is Friday, the 3rd of May of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life, and we deserve it. We deserve a Blue Moon Spirits Friday, and the French 77s are all virtually poured and ready for your imbibing pleasure. So please do, because we got a long weekend ahead of us. What a week it's been. All right, well, first you got to impeach Barr, then you got to throw him in prison. Always remember, though, John Mitchell did not go to prison. In fact, he wasn't tried for his crimes until he was no longer Attorney General. It was after Nixon had resigned and had left office that the hammer came down on a lot of people. And it came down. And he spent, well, a bit of time behind bars. I know he could have played tennis if he was capable. But the fact remains is that an attorney general went to jail for obstructing justice. And we are seeing an obstruction of justice right in front of our faces, and they think they can get away with it because they're being so visible. We're not hiding it. Yeah, you're not. And stop saying that this guy, Bill Barr, has had an esteemed career. It's only esteemed in right-wing circles because he put the stop to Iran-Contra and got a bunch of people pardoned after the fact. That is his legacy. He's a mercenary. Yeah, a hitman. And he's doing pretty good. And, he's acting like a concierge. So that's the structure of government we have now. Sounds Russian, doesn't it? Like a Russian mob operation. You know why? Because it is. And we got to stop beating around the bush. I love the fact that Rudy Giuliani and the others are trying to push this Ukrainian scandal, like Biden's son was doing work in Ukraine, and that proves that they're the ones that are really the spies and the traitors. Pushing this false narrative because they got their hands caught in the Russian nesting doll. Yes, they did. And we all know it. At least those of us who have been paying attention, because I have to say, there's a lot of people who don't know and don't care. I mean, this is so perfect. There's a part of America that I love that is because we're all engaged and we're good neighbors and big hearts and generous and all that stuff. And then there's the other part of America, which is really a bunch of anti-intellectual know-nothings who know everything. And they know nothing about this, but they know everything about it. And what they know really sounds like the propaganda has worked. Because many of them don't believe that there's really a scandal. Or, what is worse, in my mind, they maintain, well, what's wrong with Russia helping us? These are the same people, I swear to God, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, Russia doing anything in America would have been suspect, to say the least. My God, we electrocuted people for having ties to Russia. And now it's, what's the problem? Okay, the new Wolverines and the new Red Dawn will be fighting this war digitally, I suppose, in the DMZ zone there around Colorado. Probably right there up in the Rockies. That's where they'll be doing it. Hey, we got a big show today, and it is the end of the week, so what's on the rest of the menu? Well, of course, that was Robert Reich at the top, pretty much saying that Bill Barr should be arrested and put in jail if he refuses to cooperate with the Democrats in Congress, and he hasn't. So he ought to be arrested and put in jail. And through further research, they actually do have a jail still. There's one in the Supreme Court, and there's one in the basement of the House. They're used for storage now, but hey, it's only been repurposed. Purpose it back to its original purpose. You can do that. So, why don't they? It begs the question, it really does. On the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, the Trump administration officially rolled back safety rules that were put in place after the Deepwater Horizon blowout. Trump doesn't care if oil workers get incinerated on the platform. He doesn't care. Yeah, because he's creating jobs. Someone loses their jobs by incineration. Someone gets hired to take their place. Labor Secretary Alex Acosta was shredded for knowing nothing about birth control. Yeah, well, when you're negotiating contracts and labor disputes, you would think that the guy would know something about birth control for the medical benefits that he's trying to deny people. And a Trump State Department official had a really racist take on U.S.-China relations. And he didn't think it was racist either, because everybody he knows talks like that. After the break, we move to the chef's table where the ACLU and other rights groups sued the U.S. government over Barr's decision to hold asylum seekers without bond. Wow. Yeah, because apparently now, not everybody has rights in America. There are classes of people that have absolutely no rights, which is exactly the opposite of what our Constitution says. But Barr doesn't care. He's a mercenary hitman, or worse. And Trump has left America without a permanent defense secretary for 5 months. Feature? Not a bug. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com. On the rightish of the page is the chat room link monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the leftish of the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will notice the link to our contribute button. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, that would be grand, because we are in savings mode right now to buy new machines, because we have been in continuous broadcasting for 8 years. 8 continuous years of 24/7, 365 resistance broadcasting, because, hey, that's what we do. It's our prime directive. That and finding and electing more and better Democrats. More and better Democrats. That's another prime directive too. It's all interconnected, and we have been unable to do this without you. And thank you for your generosity. So do become a recurring Patreon. If you could afford even the cost of a latte type coffee drink once a month, that goes a long way here. And thank you very much once again. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, you can do so very simply by going to @Netroots Radio. It can't be simpler than that. And Tom takes care of that platform, and we are forever grateful that he does. I take care of @Justice Putnam, and I also post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime, and then scramble to get those links put out on social media so it expands far and wide. You can follow the show on Twitter @CookbookWest and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and really wherever. So do. Well, why don't we go ahead and dive right into these offerings here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Oh, did I tell you it's Blue Moon Spirits Fridays? I'm sure I did. This first offering is out of Think Progress by E.A. Crunden. The Department of Interior is rolling back offshore drilling safety protections put in place after the 2010 BP Deepwater Horizon disaster, the worst oil spill in U.S. history. And I got to tell E.A. Crunden, it wasn't a spill. It was a blowout. Okay? I hate this when they call these catastrophes an oil spill. Damn it, it was a blowout. There's a big difference, and I don't know, can you tell just by the syntax and the actual words? There's a difference between spill and blowout. What happened in the Gulf of Mexico was a blowout. And I know from whence I speak because I used to work in the industry, so there. All right, enough editorializing. Let's get back to this offering. The announcement comes as the Trump administration's coastal fossil fuel ambitions are under intense scrutiny following legal setbacks and bipartisan opposition, because even Republicans don't want a blowout in their waters. Okay? Let alone a spill. Months after it first announced the weakening of safety rules, the Department of Interior on Thursday, that would be yesterday, unveiled its final plan for Port Fourchon, Louisiana, an area deeply connected to offshore drilling. You mean all their shrimp industry went totally kaput because of the Deepwater Horizon oil blowout. In a statement, Interior Secretary David Bernhardt said the move would alleviate unnecessary regulatory burdens while maintaining safety and environmental protection offshore. You mean like how it was before the Deepwater Horizon blowout? It's one thing to have the technology to be able to get down, 2 miles in under the water, and then another, how far it was, 1,200 feet, something like that, under the ocean floor. It's one thing to have the technology to drill it. It's another to be able to cap the thing when you have a blowout. And that's what they didn't count on. And the technologies they did have to, pretty much prevent a blowout, they decided they would save some money by not putting it in. Yeah, they saved some money. The Obama-era regulations were finalized in 2016 after 6 years of development. 6 years for these safety precautions to be put in. The stricter rules came in response to the BP disaster, which killed 11 people and spilled at least... It wasn't a spill. You don't spill 4.9 billion barrels of crude oil into the Gulf of Mexico. You blow that out. And, of course, that devastated coastal communities and destroyed wildlife. The rules imposed stricter requirements on equipment, including blowout preventers, among other measures. The rollback weakens those regulations, in addition to allowing third-party companies to inspect equipment rather than government officials, and would also extend the period between inspections, because you got to get away with stuff, and if you're, making sure everything's perfect for the inspector, it really hinders your ability to cut corners. Now, this announcement came a week after Barnhart, a former oil and gas lobbyist, backed away from plans to open virtually all U.S. waters to drilling following legal setbacks. Coastal communities across the political spectrum have united against those ambitions, and Republicans have expressed concerns that such a drilling expansion could harm the party in 2020, do you think? But the Department of Interior has yet to officially retract the plans, and the department has not elaborated on its plans. The Interior is also still processing seismic permits in the Atlantic Ocean despite pushback from shoreline lawmakers and, more importantly, businesses. Offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is by Emily Singer of Share Blue Media. One would think Labor Secretary Alex Acosta would understand basic things about birth control, given that his cabinet department is trying to implement rules that let bosses cite their religious beliefs to refuse to offer insurance plans to their employees that cover various forms of contraceptives. You have to give up all your rights to have a job in America, like the good old days. Yet, Representative Lauren Underwood, a freshman Democratic lawmaker who happens to also be the youngest lawmaker in all of Congress right now, who was a nurse before winning election in Congress in 2018, exposed just how little Acosta knows or cares about birth control, the reasons women need it, and the impact his actions will have on women's health and financial stability. For women, reproductive health care is health care, Underwood told Acosta at the hearing, but your department has issued rules that deny that science of reproductive health care and allow employers to deny workers health insurance that covers contraceptives. Underwood then went on to ask Acosta basic questions about birth control. She asked him whether he knew how much it cost, that it is used for many other health conditions and not just to prevent pregnancy, and that for many women, preventing pregnancy is a health issue in and of itself. Acosta evaded or danced around answering her questions, to which Underwood laid down facts about just how expensive birth control is without insurance coverage, and the litany of conditions women use birth control to treat, including polycystic ovarian syndrome, endometriosis, and anemia. Women's lives and their health depend on their ability to access contraceptives, Underwood said. Your actions, sir, are denying science and putting American women at risk, of course. Federal courts have blocked the rule that the Trump administration tried to implement to exempt employers from offering contraceptive coverage for religious reasons. A study by the Kaiser Family Foundation about the rule showed just how destructive it could be. should the courts ultimately allow it to stand. As a result of the new regulation, choices about coverage and cost sharing will be made by employers and private colleges and universities that issue student plans, the study states. For many women, their employers will determine whether they have no-cost coverage to the full range of FDA-approved methods. Their choice of contraceptive methods may again be limited by cost, placing some of the most effective, yet costly methods out of financial reach. It's alarming that the people making such consequential decisions on women's reproductive rights have not even a basic understanding of how contraceptives are used. Michael of Think Progress brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. On Monday evening, a State Department official claimed that the United States cannot focus on human rights if it wants to combat China, and that China presents the first time the United States has faced a great power competitor that is not Caucasian. Oh, my God. Wow. I guess this guy's a social Darwinist now, isn't he? The comments from Chiron Skinner, the State Department's Director of Policy Planning, came during the New America Future Security Forum in Washington. Questioned by New America CEO Anne Marie Slaughter about the Trump administration's China policy, Skinner attempted to draw a clear line between American policy regarding the Soviet Union and the United States developing policy regarding China. However, instead of focusing solely on economic competition or Chinese territorial aggression in places like the South China Sea, Skinner discussed how China presents a different civilization than previous adversaries like the USSR. According to Skinner, U.S. efforts to highlight Soviet human rights abuses, including the United States push for the landmark Helsinki Final Act in 1975, which pledged support for human rights, helped topple the USSR in 1991. However, focusing on highlighting China's human rights abuses is apparently a futile task because they're not white. They're different than us. They have a different system of morality where the human is not important. And they kill them, and they kill them. And I'm just adding that as sort of like a exclamation point. But that's how they think. Skinner said, not to make light of the Cold War. Yeah, let's not. And the reality of nuclear war that could have happened, and the fact that we came close in some instances. Do you think I dove under desks quite often back when Cuba and the United States were going to go at it, meaning the USSR and us? But when we think about the Soviet Union and that competition, in a way, it was a fight within the Western family. Karl Marx was a German Jew who developed a philosophy that was really within the larger body of political thought that has some tenets even within classical liberalism. And so in that way, I think it was a huge fight within the Western family. Oh, it's the old competition between the East and the West. And the East is so inscrutable. You can't trust them. Yeah, I don't know. Can you trust us? And you could look at the Soviet Union, part west, part east, but it had some openings that got us the Helsinki Final Act in 1975, which was a really important Western concept. Then it opened the door to undermine the Soviet Union, a totalitarian state on human rights principles. That's not really possible with China. This is a fight with a really different civilization and a different ideology. And the United States hasn't had that before. Really? Well, how else were you able to genocide the American Indian off the face of the continent, huh? It's unclear why focusing on China's human rights abuses, which Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has actually done, especially as it pertains to China's internment camps for Muslims, is futile. A State Department spokesperson did not respond to questions on Skinner's comments. Well, let's get to our break. And when we come, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be laughing, but these guys, and they're mostly guys too. Let's go to our break, and when we get back from the break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today and the week. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. This week, plowing ahead. With the new movie Diane, older moviegoers get a gem and an outlier from Hollywood's usual demographic focus. The movie is the first narrative directorial project from writer-comedian Kent Jones, formerly of The Rachel Maddow and Daily Shows, and is a deep character study with the lead played by veteran Mary Kay Place. Diane lives alone in the Berkshires and shares a rich community life. All, however, is not perfect, as we soon learn. She has a son with drug problems, a dying cousin, and one big secret. But she's anchored by community work, especially helping at a kitchen for the poor. We get to know the stoic Diane character in bits of conversations at dinners, in hospital rooms, and in a bar during a curious retrospective journey with a fabulous soundtrack. The big reveal sort of slides in at just about the right time for you to put it in perspective. Between substantive scenes almost like chapter demarcations are long first-person shots of her driving through the rural wooded landscape, often at night and almost always uphill. Diane's drug addict son, played by Jake Lacey, alternates between substance abuse and Jesus, and a dinner scene where Lacey's character attempts to save Diane's soul is as uncomfortable as it is telling. Along with Place and Lacey, not enough can be said about the cast of mature character actors who form the community with whom Diane interacts. And then there's product placement, specifically books by Emily Dickinson, which are at Diane's bedside and on her coffee table as she addresses her diary. Dickinson understood this movie's story 150 years ago, writing, "Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tunes without words and never stops at all." This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Mike Friend. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Karen Hopkin. Casanova. The name is synonymous with a reputation for romantic, well, let's say, excess. But a new study suggests that the real Giacomo Casanova may have exaggerated his sexual exploits. Not in terms of their sheer volume, but in their infectious aftermath. Because though Casanova claimed to have suffered several bouts of gonorrhea, researchers could find no traces of the responsible microbe on the pages of the womanizer's handwritten memoir. The findings will appear in the journal Electrophoresis. Casanova's memoir, completed in 1798, fills 12 volumes, and its English translation runs to 3,500 pages. In this tell-all, Casanova tallies some 122 lovers and confesses to recurring gonorrheal relapses. To investigate these claims, researchers turned to a technique they'd previously used to positively identify the bacterium that causes plague on the pages of death registries from 17th century Milan.
Thus, we thought we would be able to detect the gonococcus on Casanova's pages, since he candidly admitted in his memoirs having been infected by gonorrhea in his first sex intercourse at the age of 18 and having suffered from relapses of the sex pathology along his lifetime as a gallant lover.
Pier Giorgio Righetti, professor emeritus at Milan Polytechnic. Righetti and his colleague, Gleb Zilberstein, who heads a company called Spectrophon in Israel, developed a handheld device that allows them to capture and characterize protein fragments and other macromolecules from the surface of historical documents. Such biological materials can get stuck to a manuscript when, say, someone licks his fingers to more easily turn the book's pages, leaving behind traces of potentially infected saliva. But in the case of Casanova,
as luck goes, no traces of gonococcus could be detected.
They did, however, find traces of cinnabar, a red pigment containing mercury sulfide. At the time, that chemical was used to treat the sexually transmitted diseases du jour, including syphilis and gonorrhea.
It is thus quite likely that Casanova had been using mercury sulfide to cure a relapse of his pathology.
So it could be that his infection was in remission when Casanova penned the 3 or 4 pages of chapters 1 and 2 that the researchers were able to examine. And that in addition to his way with women, Casanova also had a deft hand with 18th century pharmaceuticals. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Karen Hopkin.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
As the days get longer and the weather warms, people of all ages will start to spring into action. Spring is a great time to breathe fresh air, stretch your arms and legs, and get physically active outdoors. Lack of physical activity contributes to obesity, heart disease, stroke, and other chronic health conditions. Fortunately, many communities are making it easier and safer to be physically active. Neighborhoods across the country are working together to create more public spaces for walking, running, biking, and other physical activities. Adults should get at least 150 minutes of physical activity each week, and children should get 60 minutes a day. If you find it hard to walk to a local recreation center, park, or playground, learn how to make your neighborhood a place that makes healthy living easier. Visit makinghealtheasier.org for information about ways communities can change to get more people outside and moving.
For the most accurate health information, visit www.cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution, and you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage, because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
Quote, on April 2nd, the Federal Department of Justice issued a horrifying report on Alabama's prisons that contained graphic accounts of prisoners being tortured, burned, raped, sodomized, stabbed, and murdered in unsupervised dormitories. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. The just-quoted New York Times article went on to report that Alabama prisons are lousy with corruption, rife with drugs and sharp knives, They are crammed full of inmates, holding 2 to 3 times their maximum capacity. And the prisons are way understaffed. Officers often stand behind a barricaded secure area and tell inmates who have fled to them looking for safety to go get a knife. Torture in Alabama prisons is not legal or constitutional, but it is and has been facilitated, condoned, sanctioned, and accepted. These conditions continue because people on the outside generally pay little or no attention, proving the maxim that prison walls are meant as much to keep the public and the press out as they are to keep the prisoners in. Here's an update. The Department of Justice has threatened to sue the state of Alabama and its prison system. And since the report was issued in early April, 3 correctional officers in that state have been attacked, and at least 1 prisoner has been stabbed. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU, because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1886. A little after 3 o'clock on that Monday in Chicago, radical labor activist and newspaperman August Spies climbed onto a boxcar to give a speech about the fight for the 8-hour day. For weeks, he had been giving speeches all over the city in the ramp-up for the large May Day strike and rallies. Despite being exhausted, he agreed to address the crowd of German and Bohemian lumber shovers. Very near the rally where Spies spoke stood the McCormick Reaper Works. The McCormick workers had been at the heart of labor struggles in the city. 1,500 workers had been locked out of the McCormick plant over a dispute about wages. Tensions ran high as the company brought in scab labor to replace the locked-out workers. Approximately 200 striking McCormick workers picketed outside the plant. As Spies gave his speech to the lumber shovers, the shift bell at McCormick sounded, marking the end of the workday. As the scabs exited the building, the angry locked-out workers swarmed around them. Suddenly, shots rang out from the direction of the McCormick plant. Spies climbed off his boxcar and ran to the plant to see what happened. There, he found 200 police officers shooting at the strikers and beating them with clubs. In all, the police killed 4 strikers and wounded many more. Outraged, August Spies ran back to his newspaper office, where he drafted a circular that urged working men to retaliate for the police violence. He began to plan for a rally for the next day at Haymarket Square, in what would become one of the most significant events in the global labor movement and history. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
With all that talk of a coming constitutional crisis, it's probably safe to say that that moment has arrived. The executive and legislative branches of the federal government are locked into a showdown in the wake of the Mueller investigation. Democrats are furious that Attorney General William Barr refused to testify before the House Judiciary Committee or hand over an unredacted version of the Mueller report. They must now decide what to do about it.
Making a show of a no-show, House Democrats aiming their anger at an empty chair rather than the Attorney General.
Mr. Barr's moment of accountability will come soon enough.
One lawmaker even bringing a bucket of KFC.
The message is that Bill Barr is a chicken.
William Barr did not appear because he did not want to answer questions from staff lawyers on the Judiciary Committee. Top Republicans deriding the whole thing as theater. Barr now runs the risk of being held in contempt of Congress for not cooperating with lawmakers' requests. Although even if that happens, it wouldn't have much teeth. For Barr, it's not the only flashpoint after this explosive comment from the House Speaker.
The Attorney General of the United States of America was not telling the truth to the Congress of the United States. That's a crime.
Speaker Nancy Pelosi is referring to an exchange several weeks ago when Barr was asked about reports the special counsel's team was worried about how Barr described their findings.
Do you know what they're referencing with that?
No, I don't. I suspect that they probably wanted, more
put out.
But it turns out days earlier, Barr had received this letter from Robert Mueller expressing his concerns. The Justice Department calling Pelosi's comment a baseless attack that's reckless, irresponsible, and false.
For his part, the president continues to pile more lies on top of the more than 10,000 he's already told during his presidency that have been compiled by the Washington Post. Since the man doesn't know how to speak without lying, he insisted that he's been totally transparent and said the investigation is over.
Nobody has ever done what I've done. I've given total transparency. It's never happened before like this.
So Congress shouldn't
be looking anymore. This is all. It's done.
In a 5-page letter, White House lawyer Emmett Flood bashed special counsel Robert Mueller's report on the Russia investigation, calling it a, quote, law school exam paper, and accusing Mueller of playing politics. Flood said Mueller should have made a decision on possible obstruction of justice charges against Trump. The report found no evidence that Trump's 2016 campaign colluded with Russia, but it was inconclusive on whether the president obstructed justice. And if you read the whole report, it's quite apparent that he did. Meanwhile, House Democrats are still demanding that Attorney General Barr release the full, unredacted report to them. If he doesn't, they're thinking about holding him in contempt. This is all just adding to the pressure to have Mueller testify before Congress. While Lindsey Graham, who chairs the Senate Judiciary Committee, has no plans to invite Mueller to testify, Gerald Nadler and the Democrats on the House Judiciary Committee have begun negotiating directly with Mueller about his upcoming appearance. On the other hand, Donald Trump has issued a directive to his administration not to cooperate with any congressional subpoenas. During his testimony before the Judiciary Committee, under questioning from Senator and 2020 presidential candidate Kamala Harris, Barr claimed he didn't know whether Donald Trump had suggested he investigate anyone.
Attorney General Barr, has the president or anyone at the White House ever asked or suggested that you open an investigation of anyone?
I wouldn't.
Yes or no?
Could you repeat that question?
I will repeat it.
Yeah.
Has the president or anyone at the White House ever asked or suggested that you open an investigation of anyone? Yes or no, please, sir?
The president or anybody else?
Seems you would remember something like that and be able to tell us.
Yeah, but I'm trying to grapple with the word suggest. I mean, there have been discussions of matters out there that they have not asked me to open an investigation. But
perhaps they've suggested?
I don't know. I wouldn't say suggest.
Hinted?
I don't know.
Inferred? You don't know. Okay.
Since Barr took control of the Department of Justice, Trump has publicly called for an investigation into Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden. In other news, the Trump administration said it would roll back major regulations on offshore drilling rigs, ending safety measures put in place after the disastrous 2010 Deepwater Horizon oil blowout that spewed 4.9 million barrels of oil into the Gulf of Mexico. Trump also announced a new rule that would protect medical providers who object to certain procedures, such as abortions and gender transitions, for moral or religious reasons, threatening trans people and patients seeking reproductive health care. And it happened again. A 16-year-old migrant boy died in U.S. government custody this week, the third child since December to die in detention. Officials have not yet revealed the identity of the teen, who officials said was not accompanied by any family. And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener supported, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com/donate.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 44 degrees Fahrenheit. We actually got down to about 42 last night, and there has been the freeze warning in the outlying areas was lifted, but there was still a frost warning and fairly close. But fortunately, in my protected area here where the mothership resides, my gardens are okay. Keeping my fingers crossed. All right. So I don't know how long these freeze and frost warnings are going to continue. They're a bit concerning. So stop it, please. Winds are light and variable out of the south-southeast. Though will be shifting out of the north in about an hour and a half to 2 hours at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And then tonight will shift then to the north-northwest, coming out of the north-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And then tomorrow out of the north again at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Scouring winds, I like to call them. We are going to have a high in the low 80s, overnight lows in the low 50s, and pretty much plentiful sunshine. And that is indicative of the UV index warning that I'll be giving you in just a moment here. Grass pollen is high. Air quality index is in the good range, but it has gone up to 44 parts per million. Someone was burning a lot of brush trash yesterday, and they can do that around here, and I hate it. Beautiful, clear, sweet air, and they had to foul it by giving us the smell of what it was like when we had the forest fires. In fact, it kind of concerned me a bit, but it was just somebody allowed to burn their brush. Damn you. And at winds that might throw a spark, you might want to be careful now, wouldn't you? Even though the place is green and lovely. Stop it. Well, that UV index is now very high, and it is at 8. So people better take care and put on sunscreen. So I will, and I also wear a hat. Barometric pressure is actually rising at 29.87 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles, and relative humidity is down to 65%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. London is 58 and mostly cloudy. Paris is 63 and mostly cloudy. Rome is 67 and partly cloudy, and they do have a weather advisory for electrical storms in the area that can really mess around with the electrical grid at Rome. I've been there when it happened. Kiev is 68 and mostly cloudy. Kabul is 66 and mostly cloudy. Hong Kong is 72 and partly cloudy. Tokyo is 63 and mostly cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 68 and partly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 51 and cloudy with a small craft advisory offshore and on the bay. And New York is 55 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. Christina Cook of Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Immigrant rights groups asked a U.S. court yesterday, Thursday, to reverse a Trump administration decision that allows asylum seekers who cross the border illegally to be held without bond. Now, I'm still confused. How are asylum seekers crossing the border illegally when they have to cross the border to be able to apply for asylum? I thought they were crossing the border legally to apply for asylum. This is William Barr splitting hairs again, and it actually started before Barr came on, but he likes to do it. The groups, which include the ACLU, said an April 16th decision by William Barr violates the asylum seekers' rights under U.S. law and puts thousands of people at risk of being detained for months or even years while they wait for the cases to work their way through a backlogged immigration court system because Trump hates judges. If you just got rid of the judges and let just ICE and Border Patrol decide about asylum on the spot, we would be done with this pesky problem, and no brown person seeking asylum would ever come here again. The only people that we will allow are a lot of Russian white girls to come here and have anchor babies because we need more of them, especially in Florida. This is about the Trump administration's agenda of locking up any asylum seeker they can to deter people from seeking protection under our laws. And that was Michael Tan, a senior staff attorney at the ACLU. The ACLU filed a challenge with the American Immigration Council and the Northwest Immigration Rights Project. The administration cannot bypass the Constitution by arbitrarily locking people up. And, of course, the Department of Justice has declined to comment because why would they? William Barr has already landed that plane.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
This last amuse-bouche here at the Chef's Table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays by the great Oliver Willis, is fairly maddening. 2.1 million troops do not have a permanent leader for their ranks. The U.S. has just entered its 5th month without a permanent Secretary of Defense, even as the military faces multiple dangerous challenges across the world. Patrick Shanahan has been acting Secretary of Defense since the 1st of January, and Trump has not nominated anyone to take over the position because if he nominates someone, they have to go through the nominating process, and he wants somebody completely loyal to him and not to the United States of America. This is the longest America's gone without a permanent Secretary of Defense in the 72 years the position has existed. Trump's vacancy has lasted 115 days, while the previous was 60 days. That occurred 30 years ago under H.W. Bush. Wow, William Barr was around then, too. Everything comes full circle with this group. The 1.3 million active duty and 865 reserve troops in the military are fighting a war in Afghanistan and fighting terrorism across the world, including ISIS, who Trump falsely declared 100% defeated, while the U.S. deals with international flashpoints like Venezuela and North Korea. And, you know, his last Secretary of Defense got fed up. Trump has spent the entirety of his presidency attacking and fighting with key American allies like England, Germany, and France, despite long-standing military alliances with those nations because they're not loyal to him. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, and that last flourish was in this reporter's opinion, of course. And it brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the week, but Netroots Radio is going to broadcast on. We'll meet up on Monday for River City Hash Mondays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night and all weekend for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here on Monday. That's right. Right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goer. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver.